What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale, joined by my certified, fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. Before we get started, just a reminder to be extra kind to both Grant and I today, because the Knicks and the Warriors, as we record this, are facing elimination in their respective Game 5s of the second round. And so what we're about to embark on for the first half of this show is unequivocally self-harm. You're welcome. We're making sacrifices and concessions here. We're putting our own mental and physical well-being on the line, more so than Julius Randle ever has on a closeout. Before we actually get started, I'd just like to remind you the best way to support the show, hit that subscribe button, YouTube, subscribe to us on all podcast platforms as well, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever the hell you're listening to them. And please, reviews and ratings help us out a ton on Spotify and the reviews on Apple specifically. So go in there, write nice things, hopefully. Constructive criticism is fine as well. 5 stars only, though, of course, because that's what this show is. And follow us on the socials. We're at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok. We're Grant. We have over 300 followers, so I think we're big time now. It's over. That's triple digits. And then at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. So before we get started a third time, the big question: how are you doing, Grant?
Yeah, we come to you from the brink today for both. Like we are on the edge. We're on the precipice of both of our teams not getting to play basketball anymore. We will see if that comes to pass this evening. But yeah, it's I'm doing okay. I do this thing where tell me if you do this, where I'll talk myself into and out of the Warriors, like basically on a game-to-game basis almost, with some exceptions. But, so after the Lakers took the 3-1 lead, we can get into it, but the way that they did it felt like pretty decisive, and featured so many of the reasons that the Warriors tend to lose and have lost all season, that I kind of just got to a place where I've been there several times this year and I've flip-flopped away from it. But this feels pretty close to the edge. And so I get to a place where it's to sort of prevent maximum self-harm, where I just say, they just don't have it, Okay, I accept that. It's acceptance. That's what it is. It's whatever stage of grief that is, acceptance, maybe the last one. So maybe I just jump to the last stage of like the coping hierarchy or whatever. So yeah, I right now mentally I feel okay, but it's because I have accepted that the Warriors don't have it. Do you do that? And do you feel the same way with the Knicks, or do you even have to do that? Because it's kind of an apples and oranges like set of team comparisons here.
So you know how I say, like, I actually have a thick skin when it comes to social media when I actually don't? I'm Teflon when it comes to the Knicks. Like, they can still hurt me a little bit, but right. They've just been incompetent for way too long. And you're dealing with, when it comes to the Warriors, a bigger sense of finality to something that was actually sustainable, versus with the Knicks, what's happening now almost feels validating in a wildly unsettling way. And I picked them to win this series because I was always on the, you keep it to yourself because he's playing so well, but like, I'm not a Julius Randle guy. Like, I don't think this is someone the Knicks should move forward with. And I have so many overarching concerns with the team. To see them struggle is just like, for me, I was almost waiting for it. And because there's more of a transience to this core, and one that I'm just not really attached to, I think I have an easier time dealing with it. Whereas the Warriors, I would absolutely rationalize any way I could to be like, I can't let this impact my mood beyond watching the game and podcasting about it. But with the Warriors, like, you're dealing with a dynasty that might be crumbling before your very eyes. And even though you kind of knew that it was going to have to end at some point, and even as people have framed it as that last title was just like a bonus or brownie points because of the way it came, and you kind of felt like, not that the dynasty was already over, but they lost that sense of inevitability. You lived through 2 gap years or whatever it was. I would imagine it's tougher for you to reconcile what's happening right now.
Yeah, in a weird way, that last year's title, that title almost like makes this worse in a way, because I distinctly remember multiple times over the last whatever it's been, since really like 2014-15, having the thought of like, oh, this is how it ends. Like, like the Draymond blow up at halftime, I think it was in Oklahoma City where like Ramona Shelburne was like hearing him and Kerr go at it and they had to be restrained. That was way early on. I think they'd won 1 title, maybe 2. And that was like this is how it's going to end. It's going to be because Draymond like can't, stay under control, whatever. And then it wasn't. And then the Clay injury in the finals was like, this is how it ends because, Durant's going to be gone. He's already hurt anyway. Clay's ACL is done. That's like, this is how it ends. And then you have those 2 years in the interim where your expectations are low. I thought it was kind of over. And then last year was like, oh no, it's not over. They did it again. And then you finish last year and say, well, shouldn't Clay be better next year? Aren't they going to be able to have like Kuminga and Moody and Poole improve? Wiseman might be not terrible. Like there are all these reasons to say it's totally plausible that they could be a like high-end contender again. And the odds makers all saw that too. And then you had this up and down season that was, intermittently, enjoyable, but then mostly disappointing and frustrating. And then now it's, all of that has kind of come to a head with them in a 3-1 hole, coming back home at least, I guess, for game 5. But yeah, it's kind of a bummer just because it feels like the end of a thing, even though I've thought it was going to end like a half a dozen times and been wrong about it, over the last just several seasons. It's a little different, but yeah, maybe we should start with the Knicks though. If you're ready to kind of go there, I have a question for you.
I have 0 answers, but go ahead.
Right. So as I'm watching, certainly in the first round against Cleveland, and then so far against Miami, is it as simple as, because the Knicks were the number 2 offense in the league during the year, and in neither of these series have they looked anything close to that. One, what made the Knicks offense good in the regular season that's not happening now? And is it like schematic? Is it personnel? Is it some combination of all that? And 2, is it just, and maybe this will just answer the question, is it just as simple as they actually just need a bunch of offensive rebounds to be a good offense, and they aren't getting them consistently against the Heat now? So they're just not. Like, what? The offense is baffling to me because they were an offensive team during the regular season and they've been mostly a defensive team in the playoffs. And I just have lost the pulse of this team and having trouble explaining like how this same group of players looked so different during the year and put up such different numbers. So like unpack that for me if you have like half of an answer for that.
Yeah. And look, I think their flaws are being exacerbated more than their strengths are being prevented, because they're still grabbing 30% of their offensive boards against Miami. The issue is that Miami's actually winning the second chance points battle because they're not able to keep Miami off the offensive glass. We saw that. I think they were out rebounded in game 4, like 7-1 in the fourth quarter, like on the offensive glass. And that's just like, that's the fourth quarter, your season on the line. That's not something you would expect from them. But when you start to dig into just like, I think concerns that everybody would have had, even when things are humming, it's okay. Like, the Knicks, their offense was 2, but they were 11th in half court efficiency. And like you remove putbacks from the equation there, and they're not going to be as strong of a team. Like a lot of their damage was just done on their efficiency on putbacks, where they were, I think they were second in frequency of that. And so you remove that, and there are weaker points to their half-court offense. A lot of it has to deal with the supporting cast. Yes, they got up. I think this was lost in the plot somehow. I don't know if people looked at the first 2 months of the season or a month and a half. The Knicks shot threes. They were like 11th in three-point attempt rate. They just don't take a bunch of above-the-break threes because they don't have guys who can hit them. They set up a bunch of corner threes, which are going to be dependent on your dribble penetration from Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, to a lesser extent, RJ Barrett. The Heat have done an excellent job just packing the paint and taking so much of that away. Watching Julius Randle go up against Bam Adebayo, and I don't know if the ankle is hurting Julius at all. Like, that's not someone who seems like he's going to get downhill a ton. And so he has a super efficient offensive night in game 4. And just like, you still don't even feel him, probably because he was so bad defensively. And I think really what has happened, and we've seen in this series, but also with Cleveland, if you force them to go through the half court motions, like, it's not about them operating in transition or semi-transition or getting up a quicker shot, and then you're able to win or rival what they're doing on the offensive glass, they're a team that lacks a lot of counters. And I think some of the stuff they can improve upon. I don't think they've done a great job mismatch hunting. They did a better job of that in the Cleveland series. And you could talk about, well, Jalen Brunson's playing through injury, Randall's playing through injury. You've gotten probably the best version of RJ Barrett that you could have hoped for most of the series. And so there are things that are just falling a different way. I think what we're seeing about the Knicks, and I hope this is not an oversimplification after everything I just said, they still need a best offensive player.
That was going to be my next question. Are you still on that? Because you have been very consistent in that, like basically since they got Brunson. Like, nice move, makes sense. What's the bigger plan? How do you get the guy that's better than everyone that we have? Right? Is that? I don't think that's an oversimplification, but like you've been on that all year, and that I would say you've been proven more right in the playoffs, because it's clear that as good as Brunson is, and as theoretically favorable as Randall's matchups should have been against the Heat in particular, who play super small, they just need another guy, right? And a better guy.
And you can do, if you want to go this route, and maybe you do, just because if the trade market isn't there, you can paper over some of these issues on a slightly smaller scale, where it's Mitchell Robinson, who maybe we don't apologize to anymore, but it's just one of the least dynamic offensive centers in existence at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's just, if there's anything resembling him needing to make a decision after catching the ball other than placing it in, like even asking him to go up with it, is like he already needs to be in the air basically when he's catching it.
Yeah.
Like he can't, you're seeing that really limit them against Miami. I think the other thing is too, you need caps lock shooters where it's okay. Your volume was fine. Your percentage was passable. It has been neither in the playoffs. A smaller share of their shots are coming as 3-point attempts. They're shooting 29% for the playoffs. That's not even just against the Heat. I think that's for the entire playoffs. Or they're at 28.7% against the Heat specifically. They're just, you can do those things. And like, if they were to sign or get a Gary Trent Jr., that was someone I wanted them to target at the deadline. They don't have the cap space. It'd have to be a sign and trade, yada, yada, yada. But if you were to get a Gary Trent Jr., yes, I think that could help. If you were able to change out, not even change out, but like bring in a different type of five to where, okay, it's not just Sims, Mitchell Robinson, and Isaiah Hartenstein, and then, of course, the idea of Julius Randle at the 5, which is just never reality because Tibbs won't go to it outside garbage time. If you were to bring in someone who is just a little bit more versatile on the offensive end as a 5, either he spreads the floor, that's assuming Tibbs would let them play that way. You could be a better version of this team. But what we're seeing right now with Miami, who I do think has played above their head, I just want to make that clear for most of the postseason, not against the Knicks specifically, but like when you go back to that Bucks series, it matters having the best player in what could be any given series. And the Knicks, as currently constructed, are never going to have that. In most of the playoff series they go into, they are not going to have the best player. There's an argument to be made that in a lot of series, they're not even going to have the second best player, because you're dealing with number twos when it's, if it's Giannis, it's Drew or Chris Middleton. Like, it's when it's the Cavs, there's Mitchell and Garland, and Mobley is coming if he's not here already. Yes, you just beat them. I get it. But like, depth isn't going to mean everything, especially when the Knicks have been getting destroyed on the bench in this series too. And so you need that top end reliability. They don't have it. Jalen Brunson, I think he's played largely good to great with the injury he's dealing with. Jalen Brunson's not Jimmy Butler. And so that's the player you're trying to find, where you're in a situation where I would say either Julius Randle's off the team or your number 3 option, but Jalen Brunson is your number 2. I think that's what Jalen Brunson has shown this season, which is valuable information. He's capable of being a number 2. It still means that he's a number 2. And so, and the other thing I'll just note here, and maybe I won't note it because I guess I deleted the page that I had it. So I'll come back to it later. But yeah, that's where I'm at with the Knicks at this point. Is I think that I don't know that they've shown us anything that their roster shouldn't already have suggested. And that's this team. It's going to have to happen via trade. Like, they need a caps lock. They need a caps lock superstar. They don't have one.
Who do you think? Because I think I agree with what you said. I think they need more shooters. They need a player that's better than anyone they have. I think that's clear. Who do you think is the I'll put it this way. Who are the good passers on this team? Because that's another thing that I feel like has been exploited a little bit. is, Randall can get assists, but he's like kind of a mechanical, I pass as a last resort. He's not making, the read ahead of the read very often. And I really was struggling, the Heat and the Cavs too can do this to teams because they're good defenses. Like, I think we have to factor that into that they've faced two really good defenses.
Yes.
So whatever flaws you have, the Heat and the Cavs are going to, expose. And that largely true. Certainly the Heat have done that. But like, who would you view as a good passer on the team like that? Because that's another way to work around the lack of shooting is you get the ball moving, you create more open shots, you create more high value shots. And when, say Brunson gets doubled and has to get off the ball or whatever, so who would you say is a good passer? And do they have enough? And is that a viable workaround if you can't get a superstar? Does that do anything for you?
I think Jalen Brunson's a very good passer. I think he's hurt by his size in certain matchups that are going to limit the types of passes where if he can't, I think he's a different sort of passer if he's not able to get inside the arc and create havoc with his just footwork and hesitations. And you need someone who's, do you need a better passer than Jalen Brunson? Ideally, yes, but you need someone who's an equal. That's not Julius Randle. Maybe it's RJ Barrett at some point. Talk about a player I flip-flop. And you have guys who can keep the ball moving when you look at Josh Hart, but it's just not the same. They don't use Isaiah. You could say Isaiah Hartenstein's a really good playmaker. It just doesn't work in that same way. I'm actually laughing right now. Stefan Stoich, Randall is option number 9. Maybe he should be, but he's most certainly not. So, but yeah, I think Brunson is clearly, would you even have a different answer to that response?
No, that's why it's Brunson, but I mention this all the time with someone like Darius Garland, is that I think Darius Garland, if he was like 2 inches taller, would just be unbelievable. But because he's so small, I mean, he's not tiny. We're not talking like Earl Boykins out there, but it's like he is limited when he gets into the lane, or even just trying to throw over the top and make skip passes. Like that is a low key, just height is, you look at Jokic and LeBron and some of these and Luka and all these guys that can make every pass on the floor. Someone like Brunson just can't do that. Not because he doesn't see it, but because he just doesn't have the physical advantage to throw certain passes. I wanted to get this out there before I forget it. Because I was, as the Knicks were just struggling to score, their effective field goal percentage during the year was 54%. Not good. That's 20th in the league. It's 49% in the playoffs. And it's just like when you take just to circle all the way back around, that's never going to be good enough. And especially if you're playing like break even in the possession game, and especially on the offensive boards, that's just like if there's a fatal stat for the Knicks in these playoffs, that's just it. They just don't create enough like high value shots, and they don't make the harder ones that they do generate. It feels like that's the issue.
And I also think to change this to the other side of the floor, there's limitations for them defensively, as good as they can be on that. And I think they've done a great job contesting Miami shooters a lot this series. But there are two things that stand out. And look, I know some of like the games are going to support that, but Miami, the share of their 3-pointers that are going contested during this series with a defender within 2 feet. So like, or 4 feet, excuse me. It's the contested.
Tightly contested is inside.
Yeah, so within 4 feet. Yes. So, and that's including 0 to 2 feet, 2 to 4 feet. They're taking the largest share of their shots in those situations. And they're only shooting 22.2% on contested threes. But they know how to put the Knicks defense in rotation,
right,
and swing the ball around. And Jimmy Butler's excellent at that when he's seeing double teams. And they just have smart players who are going to be able to keep the ball moving, or even when it's not Jimmy Butler, keep the Knicks in rotation. The Knicks are not quick enough in those situations. And the other thing that they don't do a good job of, and this is part, I think, of Tibbs's base scheme, like they're not a team that's going to force turnovers. They're going to play a more conservative style of defense. That might get you through the regular season, but the Heat have outscored the Knicks 2-1 in points off turnovers in this series, I believe, unless I'm missing something like wild there. No, they have 82 points off turnovers through 4 games. The Knicks have 41. That's just rough. That's a personnel. I don't think the Knicks I can't force more turnovers. Yeah, great advice, Dan. They don't have the personnel to do it. I want to make that clear. Yeah. That's something else they need to look at as well leading into the offseason.
No, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, I feel like you tried to get there, and we should do this more. We should just be praising the Heat as much as we're sort of trying to like figure out what the Knicks are doing wrong, because a lot of it is just the Heat are good. They're on an absolute run right now where they're just not the same team as they were during the year, and that's all part of it. But like, it's just, we probably ought to be talking about the Knicks and to the similar extent the Warriors, like while we can, because there's a good chance that the Heat and Lakers will give us more opportunities to discuss them.
Yeah, they're look, there's going to be an Eastern Conference Finals preview that consists a lot of the Heat, and the next pod will probably have like the Knicks off-season like funeral, like what do we call that, off-season autopsy or whatever. I will say, has anything about the Heat really stood out to you like through this? I continue to marvel at like the one Duncan Robinson not shooting well from three in this series. The Knicks are still terrified of him. They're just still, and first of all, he's dribbled more than I've ever seen him ever. And I'll get to it. We have a couple comments. I'll try and get to those afterwards. The supporting Kyle Lowry has been big, like just making huge defensive plays. And he's hitting his threes in this series. Even Gabe Vincent, like he's not shooting well in this series. I thought he's fought on defense. He's been his aggression on offense, I think matters, especially when you don't have Tyler Hero or for that matter, Victor Oladipo available to you. I think Bam has been able to ratchet it up at points offensively as well. And this has nothing to do with how well he's done defensively. And I think a lot of the times he has thrown Julius Randle either like getting the ball out of his hands or just kind of taking away a lot of his bread and butter. Caleb Martin, just again, the Heat. I want to make the Heat are not shooting well from three this series. They're just winning the 3-point battle by 27 points over 4 games. Like that's big. In addition to winning the turnover battle, in addition to winning the second chance points battle. Yeah, which it's by a hair, 49-48. That still fucking matters because that's supposed to be the Knicks thing. Yeah. They're winning the transition battle. Again, 37-34. This isn't a transition like series really, but like they're winning almost every single margin and so thoroughly. And I remain astounded by Jimmy Butler, who by the way is not hitting his threes either, which is weird because it's the playoffs right now. And to be fair, he's only taking 2 a game in the series, but that's like, what is that, quadruple what he took in the regular season? Are we going to trick ourselves into thinking that there's more depth to this Heat roster leading into the offseason than there actually is? Because like you're looking, and the other thing is, I'm not trying to scale too far ahead, but like Max Strus and Gabe Vincent are free agents this summer. It's just like, what do you sort of do here? But I think the thing that has stood out more than anything to me is that I don't want to say experience matters, but like we've seen most of these role players come up big in the playoffs before, specifically for Miami, with the exception of maybe Kyle Lowry, but he's done it everywhere else he's been. Right. Toronto, excuse me. Like they're playing at a level where, I know the Heat shooting kind of picked up after the All-Star break. That's not what's winning them this series. They're just their supporting cast right now is deeper than it was in the regular season. And the only difference is you've thrown Kevin Love in there, who's not been great this series necessarily either. But also like you don't have Tyler Hero or Victor Oladipo anymore to play that card. And so I cannot measure how impressed I am with not just what Jimmy Butler has done during these playoffs. The second best player, maybe the third best behind Jokic and Devin Booker. Devin Booker's been the clear one to me. But like, my God. And so I don't think it's an insult to it's an indictment of the Knicks that they lose to the Heat. But like, this is not a team that you need to be embarrassed to actually lose by.
No, I think you just shouldn't be able to play Cody Zeller and Haywood Highsmith. And like, honestly, even guys like Vincent and Strus, who didn't have good seasons, but to your point, they have contributed in big ways to teams that have made conference finals and finals. And like, that's, that clearly matters. But it seems I don't have any, number for it or whatever. And Julius Randle kind of talked about it, about like they want it more. And we try to stay away from that kind of analysis. But like when you watch the Heat play, especially in contrast to the Knicks, it sort of feels like everybody that takes the floor is just empowered and understands what they're supposed to do. And they just do it at 100%. And if you do that for an entire game, it doesn't really matter who's out there. So, Robinson can be missing threes. He's still going to shoot them. And the Knicks are going to treat him like he's making 50% of them. Strus and Vincent have just never seen, a tough shot that needs to be taken that they wouldn't take. And Butler just sort of is the organizing principle. And I don't know what it is. It feels like a hashtag Heat culture thing where it's just like, that's real. They're willing to compete harder. I think Spoelstra deserves immense amounts of credit for somehow losing. I mean, Hero's no worse than the third best offensive player on that team, depending on what you think about Bam, probably the second best, just pure offensive player, and still finding ways to score. Just like they'll put the ball in Bam's hands as like a last resort, not a last resort, but like when things aren't working, they just give him the ball and it pulls either Brook Lopez or Mitchell Robinson out. They shouldn't have all these adjustments they can make. They shouldn't be able to get away with playing some of the guys they play. And they just are, because they're always defending. They make just enough shots and they're winning the possession battle, which against the Knicks is like you said, a break-even possession battle thing for the Knicks is a massive loss because they have to win it handily, especially with second chance opportunities. And the Heat are just, I mean, I don't know. Like I haven't thought at all far ahead about the conference finals, but it's like, how do you even evaluate the Heat as like, well, these are the areas that say the Sixers or Celtics will need to pick at. These are the frailties. This is where it's just like, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it feels like for the Heat because they just, I don't know, that there's some unquantifiable something that they flipped on. But also, by the way, they lost the first play-in game. Like, and we thought that is some of the worst offensive basketball we've ever seen. This team is a joke. How are they going to like go forward with this core? It's so expensive. And like, they weren't great in the second play-in game. And then they just beat the Bucks and they're going to beat the Knicks. And it's like, this was so close to just not happening. And I think above all else, it's a really good reminder that like the fate of a franchise can swing on like one game, because the Heat by all rights probably should not be here. And they're probably going to play a third postseason series, in a couple of days. It's kind of wild.
Before we get on to Dubs Lakers, Stefan says in the chat, the series makes you feel worse about the Cavs, D Mitch joining his bro Rudy and getting sweeped. I don't feel worse about the Cavs. We already talked about this. I just can't. There are concerns, but Core's just so young and talented. Yeah. I think they underachieved relative to their regular season, but I can't bring myself to be overly concerned about them.
No, not really. I think, yeah, I don't feel any worse than I did, immediately after they lost that series. They have a bright future still.
What is your biggest overarching batch of thoughts leading into Warriors Lakers about what we've seen, what we're going to see? Let it all out. We've done the Knicks catharsis. I don't feel any better, just for the record, but let it all out.
No, I think I want to start kind of micro, and credit the Lakers a little bit, honestly, because so Game 4, there were all these rumblings ahead of time that Gary Payton was going to start again, and that there was the Warriors felt good about like some of the adjustments they were going to make, and the suggestion I think by Marcus Thompson was that they might just not set screens and bring Anthony Davis into the play, and Curry was going to have to beat guys in isolation. That's like the last tier down of like, they want to play the beautiful game. And then when that doesn't work, they run a bunch of pick and rolls with Steph. And then when that doesn't work, they either switch to who's guarding the screener or they just get rid of the screen altogether. And they were down to kind of the last step. The issue was the pick and roll was working great with Peyton as the roll guy and bringing Davis out to have to, be away from the basket. But credit the Lakers, because in the second half, they put Davis on Andrew Wiggins. And Andrew Wiggins can do almost everything exceptionally well on a basketball court, except make a decision on the move. And so when you wanted to bring Davis up into the screening action, because he was guarding Wiggins as a screen and roll guy is like a non-starter. That's just not something he ever does. It's not something he's good at. And that completely short-circuited one of the best sources of offense the Warriors had against the Lakers in this entire series. They couldn't run that pick and roll anymore because Wiggins doesn't know how to do that and he's not good at it. So credit the Lakers for just making the right adjustment. And then like, we can get into the Warriors self-sabotage, and particularly Jordan Poole looking very often like he's out there trying to do the wrong thing just repeatedly on both ends. Like, I was joking with some friends on a text chain, like, and if Jordan Poole were trying to lose games for the Warriors, how different would it look from what he's actually been doing in this series? Because all of these drives into traffic, all this over dribbling, all the non-competitive defensive possessions. Like it borders on sabotage. I'm not saying that's what's happening, obviously, but like it's almost indistinguishable from it. And that's why the Warriors went totally away from him in the second half. You can't play him. They can't play him. And so if you've already decided, well, we really can't, we're not going to play Jonathan Kuminga. We don't like to play with two bigs. Dante DiVincenzo has like one decent offensive game every 3 or 4. And then that just leaves us with like 3 or 4 guys that we can trust. And that doesn't give you enough adjustments. It doesn't give you enough variety. It puts way too much of an onus on Steph Curry. So that's why at the end of this last game, even though the Warriors kind of kicked it away with bad shot selection, turnovers down the stretch of the game, that leaves me thinking like, I don't know what the fix is now. Just because there's not like a guy you can pull off the bench that's going to give you a new dimension. You can't play Steph 48 minutes. Because I think, again, I'm rambling, but this is all connected. Part of the reason that he took those 2 terrible threes in isolation against Anthony Davis at the end of the game is because he couldn't get by him. I think he was tired because he just has to do everything if you don't play Jordan Poole more than like 10 minutes. So I'm struggling other than like make more shots, try harder, to find the adjustment that swings this series. Maybe the Warriors I think the Warriors are pretty significant favorites coming back home for game 5, but it's just, they could easily lose this game just because their best players are worn down and there aren't a lot of fixes for this. So I haven't given, I guess I'd throw to you, like, if choose between the way the Lakers have defended, the Warriors self-inflicted wounds, Poole sabotage, like what jumps out to you? Like, what is the most interesting angle from this series so far? And you can even zoom it out. Like, we can even go into like not a full post-mortem, but kind of like, what do you do from here, assuming the Warriors don't come back from this 3-1 hole? I don't know. Yeah. So I've rambled for several minutes, but that's kind of my take on it. I don't know what the fix is. You shouldn't count this team out because they've been so good for so long, but it's just difficult to sort of envision like what turning this series around even looks like.
Yeah, and we don't need to get into the actual post-mortem, although we are going to close this segment with a humdinger of a question I get to ask you, because something stumbled across I found it on Twitter that I think you're going to love it.
Okay.
But so what stands out to me most is a lot of it's done with the Lakers have been like super feisty on defense. Even I thought, so AD had a good even number game, which is
right.
That was huge. But like, he wasn't his best defensive self. Like was Dennis Schroeder their best defensive player in game 4 for the Lakers? Like, he was up there. And I'm just looking at the Lakers and their ability to sort of just like win ugly, where they're not going to have like the prettiest shot profile or shooting slashes. And then, yeah, D'Angelo Russell's been good this series, but he's not even playing during crunch time, which aside, Rob Pelinka is getting all this credit for what he did at the trade deadline. I do think he deserves some credit. But Rui Hachimura, which happened before the trade deadline, D'Angelo Russell, Jared Vanderbilt, and Malik Beasley, who's just disappeared from the rotation. All 4 of those guys, unless I'm mistaken, were not playing during crunch time for the Lakers in game 4. Which does, if we ever have to talk about the Lakers offseason, which I guess we will at some point, it makes you wonder, like, are they more likely to go the cap space route than we thought? Totally unrelated. But LeBron definitely been picking and choosing his spots in the series on offense. When he's able to get downhill, the Warriors just still have no answers. When the Lakers have if D'Angelo Russell is making shots, if Anthony Davis has like the mid-range going, or the Lakers are able to get him in motion before he gets the ball, the Warriors have had like a tough time stopping those plays. For the Warriors specifically, what stands out to me, and I think people are using what happened in game 4 as proof that the Steph Curry on-ball concept has its limitations. And in theory, it does, but this isn't about, when you call for Steph getting the ball more, it's not, we need 48 minutes of Steph has to create everything out of nothing, which is not what we saw, but they had to lean on it. It felt like more, unless I'm wrong. I need to look at like his possession allocation data, which I did not, because these are 2 series that I think are just done, quite frankly. It's a fundamental failure on the Warriors' part because they did not identify this properly, and Jordan Poole's part because he's supposed to be this player. When you have no outlet There's no one who can help you navigate the non-Steph minutes, let alone assuage the on-ball burden when he's on the court right now in the playoffs. Draymond Green, like, yeah, we know what he can do when he's kind of like has space to work with, or he's coming out of the short roll. Like slowing things down, generating shots out of nothing, that's never been him. That's never been Clay. It was supposed to be Poole. And like now they're kind of hoping, oh, is it DiVincenzo or is it Wiggins? And it's like you could talk about being disappointed in some of those players offensively, but like that's not supposed to be their job. And I know Jordan Poole is injured. He's not been injured all year, and he has not been that player all year. And you know what? It's not funny. Well, it's a little funny. He's never actually been that player. Like, it's never just been someone who can spearhead the ship independent of Steph Curry. It's not that you've always had to win in spite of him. He's a great offensive talent. He's a better finisher, even when he's out of control sometimes, I think people realize. I don't like when people are belittling him, saying he's not an NBA player. He sucks, he sucks, he sucks. But you misidentified. And we've been on this on the podcast, or at least, like, if we're going to do, I have. You've misidentified what he is supposed to be. And now you've committed $123 guaranteed million to him. And I don't know what the path forward is. We don't even need to get into that. But I don't know how you win. Do I expect him to win game 5? I do. But like to win 3 straight kind of would run counter to everything we've seen this season, where we're just waiting constantly for the Warriors to rattle off that stretch of dominance to prove that they're a italics text title contender. And Poole's struggles, Poole's letdown has been the thing that stands out the most to me. But also, like, yeah, Clay has to be culpable here too. Like, his shot has not been falling at a clip that you need it to fall. And I come away from this thinking, to put a bow on this, all those times we made jokes about Steph not having enough help, we have now reached the point, and I think we've been there for some time, where they've just not surrounded Steph with enough help. And they were working within certain financial strictures relative to their roster building. You could say they should have kept Otto Porter Jr. Look what his season turned into. Right. They got Gary Payton the second back, and he's been semi-important to them when he's not vomiting on the court. So I don't have any material answers, but it does not feel, I'd be with you in saying I would be pretty floored if this is a team that just rattles off 3 straight victories.
I would too. And Stefan Stojic says, let Poole cook at home. He needs crowd support. I mean, like, that'll help. Role players tend to play better at home. The Warriors, certainly, we've seen all season, play better at home. But I want to talk more about Poole, because I think, so one of the real issues with him, forget the defense. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a player do more things defensively on a basketball court that just, like, he's like inventing ways to be bad defensively, like these weird gambles, these like seeking contact in strange places. It, like, if you watch enough basketball, you start to just recognize patterns, and guys move kind of the same way. And if these players engage on this spot on the floor and this is the action, there's like expected sequences of movement, and his are just all different and weird and like just non-competitive half the time. So let's leave that. The role he's supposed to play offensively, and you were talking about it, is super important, because he's the only guy in theory that can heat up on his own, generate shots for others, kind of build a transition attack out of nothing. And I think if you want to be charitable to him, you would say he's looking around at the guys he's out on the floor with a lot of the time and thinking, like, these guys don't have shit. Like, if we're going to score, it's going to have to be me doing something spectacular. And I think he got a lot of positive reinforcement with that last season, albeit in a little scaled back way, where he just, like, the contributions he made offensively were really difficult shot making, penetrating, acrobatic finishes, just, highlight level offense. And it looks like he's been hunting that type of thing all season. And when he's not, and so he's just trying to do too much, he's sped up, whatever cliches you want to use, like, that is very clearly what's happening, where he's just trying to get it all himself, which I think is sort of understandable because no one else can do it. Here's the problem with that is Poole has always been better sort of as when he does trust other guys that don't have a bunch of offensive skills and gets off the ball and maybe relocates for an open shot, or just plays within some semblance of an offensive system that has a little bit of organization and passing and whatever, when he's part of, like, the controlled chaos instead of this, like, I've used this sort of, I don't know, way to explain it before. If he's part of the chaos, he's really awesome. But if he's the guy like operating alone as chaos by himself, it's terrible. Like, it's turnovers, it's falling down all the time, it's driving into traffic, it's like hopeless finish attempts against big guys that it's just not going to work. So like, I understand why he's trying to do too much, but it's also, we've just seen evidence last season of if you just trust the rest of the guys you're playing with a little bit, things get easier for everybody. And maybe those minutes aren't just catastrophically bad, which they have been. So I think most of it's on him, except that like his teammate did punch him to start the year. I know it's like we've talked about it to death, but it's hard for me to divorce some of the disinterest, some of the frustration. You see him like, grousing when he gets pulled off the floor and goes to the bench. Like, it's hard for me to divorce that entirely from what happened in preseason. And like, honestly, some of it's understandable. Like, there may have been like a real breach of trust and a real just, a line crossed, whatever, that's just what this is. Like, he's like, fuck it. I'm not a part of this team the way I used to be. I just can't summon the commitment to play the way that the coach is asking me to, and that my teammates need me to. I'm out. Like that really does feel like a plausible explanation for a lot of what's happening.
Yeah, there could be a human element to all of this.
That's what I mean. There is a human element. Like, and I think, if you want to really go down the rabbit hole, there may be a trickle down effect that is impacting guys like Jonathan Kuminga, who I gotta believe is not playing because of his attitude or his frustration or the way he's going about his business in reaction to not getting the same role he had last year. Because if you're telling me Steve Kerr's going to JaMychal Green as like a fix, and it's because he can space the floor a little bit, he's got enough size. Like, I'm sorry, JaMychal Green is not going to swing a series because he's going to make 5 threes a game or whatever it is. Like, he's had minimal impacts a couple different times. I just refuse to believe Kuminga, if left wide open, wouldn't also make like a decent number of threes and then also add athleticism, defense, rebounding, hustle. Like, that's a card that a team would have played by now, unless there was something else going on. And so I would be willing to bet when this is over, there will be reports coming out about, and the Steph Curry speech, I think, alluded to them. He was talking to a lot of the guys that were.
Imagine, by the way, getting scolded by Steph Curry, of all people, because that's just not his brand. We have guys who were signed in JaMychal Green to bolster the back end of the rotation, and youngsters who have not proven enough to be a part, frankly, of either timeline, who are lower maintenance than one of the 10 greatest basketball players of all time, still in his fucking prime.
Right.
That's wild shit.
Yeah. No, so that's just, I just think there's going to be stuff that comes out, and it's not going to reflect well on Kuminga or Poole or even, whoever else. I think DiVincenzo even got lumped into there speculatively as someone that was not happy with his role. But it's like, Moses Moody's playing, and he wasn't playing much during the season, and he's actually been okay. Like, I think they need better than okay, but he, I think, is probably the guy that has accepted his role better than some of the other lesser used players, especially the young guys. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just, this all goes all the way back to the same thing we both said, which is like, I'm not sure what success looks like for the Warriors in this series. But last thing I'll say is, we're having a very different conversation if Lonnie Walker doesn't lose his fucking mind for the whole fourth quarter and win a playoff game basically by himself. So
that was so fun to watch.
That was amazing.
Maybe not. Okay, good. I was going to say, maybe not for you, but that was just incredible. Just doing all his damage. And then did you see the stat too, that he has 27 points over his last 2 games, and Clay and Poole have combined for 29 over their last 2?
I mean, and he was in tough shots. Like, most of those were bad shots. Just like, you would not say
Walker shots though. Like,
they're great Lonnie Walker shots. So yeah, credit to him for sure. Good. Like, he's kind of, I don't know why, I root for him. I've always kind of liked him.
I miss his hair. I will say
I do miss his hair, but we're having a very different conversation if he has like 6 points instead of whatever it was, 14 in the fourth quarter. So
because you
file that away.
You do look at this series, and like to make this more about, look, this is another instance where we're talking about the team seems like they're about to get eliminated. But like some of the storylines or subplots of this series should be, okay, Jared Vanderbilt, just the Warriors aren't guarding him from beyond the arc. He's been taking them. He's just not making them. D'Angelo Russell, I think he's shooting 30% from three in this series. Austin Reeves has been relatively quiet by Austin Reeves' standards. Again, LeBron James, even like it's taken him, he hasn't had his jumper going for most of it. There's Anthony Davis sort of on and off, and really it was just he was only off in game two. But it's just like everything is so geared towards. Is there anything that stood out to you though about the Lakers aside from Lonnie Walker going kaboom? That's just impressed you.
I mean, the adjustments have been one thing. I think Darvin Ham deserves credit. The Warriors are not typically easy to scheme against. I also think Anthony Davis. This was going to be an Anthony Davis series. Stefan Stoich says Warriors young core is scary. Just wait till James Wiseman develops. Yeah, wait till those Gary Payton and those second round picks that they gave up with him to whatever. It's it's a bad sign that when someone brings up Wiseman, I'm kind of like, maybe I do wish he was still on the team.
Oh no.
I know it's a bad sign. I'm being irrational, but it's like not for the series, but just for like, well, at least once this is over, we'd have some like young players to follow when they tear the team down.
I would have told you though that Moses Moody would be the only youngster of the core four youngsters contributing during a semifinals playoff series, what would you have said if I told you that in October?
Well, I would say like what happened to the higher ceiling guys, but I will say that Moody, like early on he was never going to be a star, but it's like, he's long. He can theoretically defend and make open threes. Like he's probably the guy that is the safest bet to actually have some role. But the ceiling, high floor, low ceiling for Moody. But to get back to the Lakers, I thought it was going to be an Anthony Davis series. I thought he was going to pose problems. The Warriors would really struggle to solve on both ends. And like, that has mostly been the case. If you don't want to look at it as the Warriors are screwing this up, they're, all the self-inflicted stuff, you got to look at it as like, yeah, Davis has just been really good. And he's been really good in a way that the Warriors have struggled to handle. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, LeBron has picked his spots. I feel like Russell has shot it poorly overall, like you said, but he's had some timely stretches where, 2 or 3 threes in a row, or like hitting a couple pull-ups, and just when the Lakers have needed it. I don't know if timely shooting is really a thing, because, points scored at different points of the game, like count the same. But I wouldn't say Russell has been bad. They're certainly not like exploiting him defensively like I thought maybe the Warriors might. So yeah, I just think I've been impressed. I've been impressed with the Lakers. The other thing that's happened is both their best players have kind of held up. That was a big thing going into this, was can Davis and LeBron play at a high enough level for long enough to compete? Like, answer yes, for sure.
How big was it that they didn't need to log a shit ton of minutes in game 3?
Yeah, the blowout was huge. So now it's like, now they only need to have one more good game, basically, because they can, you don't want to let this get to 7 if you're the Lakers, but you could lose a game and play these guys 20 minutes or whatever, and you still got a great chance to win. I don't know what the odds are. I imagine the Warriors are like, I put it at like 15 to 20% to win the series, which feels high. So the Lakers just, the biggest issue, the more I talk about it, was, can those two guys stay healthy and not have a bunch of duds sprinkled in with, transcendent games? And other than one game for Davis, he's been awesome. So maybe it's that simple, right?
Yeah, the biggest standout for me, I think, has actually been Schroeder, where I think we went into the series talking about, is Reeves going to defend a bunch of Steph Curry? Is Vanderbilt? And they have. I mean, Reeves only recently. The Dubs are averaging 1.04 points per possession as a team when Dennis Schroeder guards Steph Curry. That's low.
Yeah.
That's low.
Really good.
And he's, even when he doesn't have a shot going, like, yeah, he can scramble defenses when he gets going downhill. But even when he's not scoring, he's been someone who is just, hey, he needs to play.
Yeah. I find myself watching Schroeder defend and hustle and like do all the role player stuff now that he never really did, like with Atlanta, for example. And I find myself wondering, like, how could this guy have been like an all-star a couple times if he had this approach when he had, just more rope as an offensive player and probably was a better athlete than, earlier in his career. Like the way he's playing now, if he had approached like his career as a kind of first option ish, anyway, high end starter offensively, like he could have, it feels like a little bit of a missed opportunity for him. Good for him now, but it makes me wonder what could have been.
I can't say I've thought even a little bit about that, but it is a great point. To wrap up this series, are there any buttons Golden State has left to push here? Like, what are you looking to like see from them in Game 5 or potentially beyond?
Yeah, I mean, it's nothing new. They've tried all, their triage system of offensive approaches. They're down to the kind of the last one. I think unless the Lakers put Davis on someone that can make a decision as a role guy, the Warriors will struggle to score. I don't think Curry isolating without a screen is viable, especially late in a series where he's shouldered a huge load. So, it may just be as simple as they don't turn the ball over a ton and, they get decent shooting nights from Clay and Wiggins, but it's not like, I don't think there's a tweak left, whether it's rotation or tactically, that sort of, unlocks things like saying like in Game 4 against the Celtics in the finals last year. I don't, maybe this is the greatest reverse jinx of all time and they're going to come up with something, but I don't know what that is other than, shoot better and maybe get a half decent effort from Poole and Clay, runs hot. That's kind of it for me. I don't, and asking that for 3 games in a row, their margin for error has never been big this season. So it's tough for me. Do you have anything like, which straws are we grasping at?
So I have a question to propose to you.
Okay.
It's who says no. Colin Cowherd proposed this trade. Warriors receive Jaylen Brown and Malcolm Brogdon. The Celtics receive Jordan Poole and Andrew Wiggins.
I mean, I do that if I'm the Warriors, I think, right?
Right. It's like, are the Celtics involved in these negotiations at all? Like, what would be the
why? I mean, I guess the concern is Wiggins' contract is probably really favorable going forward, and Brown, you're going to have to pay a ton. But like, okay,
there's a chance.
Money.
There's a chance. I don't say this lightly. This might be one. If this is a serious trade offer, might be one of the worst proposals of all time.
And you know what? This is how you know I can't be trusted. Is I had to think about it for a second.
When you were scrunching your face, I was like, "Is he being performative for the camera?" I hope.
No,
so.
I was just kind of like, okay, well, yeah, no, I really do like Wiggins, but no, yeah, that's a no brainer. You know who I've been thinking about? Because you got to start thinking about Poole trades, right? For the offseason. And like, I have no concept of what his value is going to be because it's probably never been lower just because he's paid and he's just turning in one of the worst playoffs we've seen in a while. But like, Orlando needs a guard. Can we just take back Jonathan Isaac, like human injury risk Jonathan Isaac for Jordan Poole and just call it good? Can we do that? And then you have, a incredibly high risk, high reward potential all defensive guy to eventually supplant Draymond. Like, I don't know. This is where I'm at now. I'm trying to get Jonathan Isaac for Jordan Poole, and I'm not sure it can happen.
It's good. I think the Warriors do need more conservative authors in their locker room. That's definitely
yeah.
Let's move on to Celtics Sixers.
Okay.
This series, I think we both picked the Celtics in 5. That was operating under the assumption that Embiid might miss more than one game. Even when we factored in Embiid playing more, I think we said, Celtics in 6. What are your overarching thoughts about this series as we get ready for Game 6?
I'm going to try not to dump on the team that's losing now for a change of pace. And I think from the Sixers perspective, my overarching thoughts are a surprise that they've had 2 phenomenal James Harden games. Like, he basically won them 2 games, one of which did not feature Joel Embiid in the lineup. So it's like a little bit of a stretch to say, well, that's found money because Harden, for all his playoff, whatever throughout his career, it's just like, he's capable of that. He can get you 40 and just win you a game. That's how he spent like 7 straight seasons with the Rockets when he was really at his peak. So like, yeah, once in a while, those games are going to happen. So impressed by Harden. I think, again, I keep looking for these things to say, well, we're having a different conversation on Game 5, right? Where are we? It's 3. I can never remember the game. The most recent game. Boston shot 3 for 13 on wide open threes. That's 6+ feet of distance between them and the shooter and the defender, and 4 of 15 on open, which is like 4 to 6 feet. So yet again, just like if the Celtics make a couple more threes, because that was a single digit game, then like, what are we talking about? So I do think there's reasons to be critical of the Celtics. Their offense gums up sometimes. They have not had a good answer for Harden. They're letting Embiid shoot the mid-range jumpers that he wants to, but like, make some shots and things are a lot different. If like Horford in particular, like the first half, like Horford was getting good looks and just can't hit anything. And, that's a big deal because then Embiid doesn't have to, then the Sixers can pack the paint and it just makes things harder. And it makes an offense that is prone to kind of gear grinding, like fall into that more quickly and struggle to get out of it. But the Sixers have just been good. Like Tyrese Maxey finally got loose. Getting him the ball on the move is just like, that's hard to handle if you have decent spacing.
So fast.
Yeah.
So fast.
So I don't know. I'm mostly crediting the Sixers. And maybe that's just because I didn't think that they had much of a chance in this series. So it's like more surprising to me, but yeah, I don't know. Do you feel differently? Do you think this is a Sixers success or a Celtics failure?
It's a Sixers success for sure. I mean, like even Daniel House, who's apparently just a 10-game player, comes in midway through the playoffs. Right. He's just like dominant. He was huge so good for them. And then you mentioned Tyrese Maxey. Tobias Harris had a great game, just rebounding. I thought he provided some tough one-on-one defense. And then he's gotten better at making quick decisions with the ball, but he gave you more of a scoring punch. And in the chat, Stefan Stojic, being beaten by Harden without a first step. And like, look, Harden still found ways to just dice up the Celtics in the middle of the floor. And I think that's the biggest criticism. And people were lighting into Joe Mazzulla for this. And I saw Half Court Hoops on Twitter during Game 5. It said, the Celtics are just letting the Sixers go to that left side pick and roll, like to their left with Embiid and Harden. Harden wants to go to his left. And if you're going to be in drop against Embiid and give him the middle of the floor, he's been banging in those jumpers. And so what is the adjustment? And I wonder, maybe Horford can't play this way anymore. And look, Robert Williams III certainly can't play this way anymore. He's been just, speaking of diced up, it feels like he's just been relegated to obscurity in this series. Like, can you just go and play higher now and put because when you're looking at who's behind Al Horford, even if he gets beat, like you're going to be helping. There's sometimes it's PJ Tucker and then like a Daniel House on the same side of the floor. And even if it's Maxey on that side of the floor, like you can live with someone helping off PJ Tucker in the corner because there might be times where he doesn't shoot. And I know he's been on so many good teams for a reason. He's an NBA champion for a reason. But I think the Celtics, they seem very hesitant to throw to it the ball unless it's ever Embiid. And like, are we at the point where it's like, well, maybe try something different there? So that might feel more like a failure. And I'll also say their offensive process for a team that was so elite offensively, statistically during the regular season, there's just so much variance in their offensive process. And I feel like I've said it probably too many times on this podcast, but like they'll go through stretches where, okay, yeah, they're not really committing any turnovers. The ball might be moving. They're taking higher percentage shots. And then it's just, there'll be stretches where, they're committing a shit ton of turnovers and they're taking early contested looks in the shot clock that make no sense. And Jaylen Brown is deviating. Jason Tatum looks super passive or is settling. And I think he adjusted well. He was the one member of the Celtics who I think for the most part adjusted well as Game 5 went on, where he started attacking more and then he had the jumper going for a little bit. And like you said, they did miss a lot of high quality looks. And I like I said, I do think there's probably some more. I think they could stand to be more aggressive defensively against Joel Embiid and Joel Embiid and James Harden specifically. Maybe we're then killing them if they do that, and then they're getting carved up by Tyrese Maxey or PJ Tucker from the corners. But I think it's easier to live with that than if we know Harden, especially if Harden's going to take mid-range J's, that was kind of a thing at the start of the season, and then it vanished into nothing, and now it's just a thing again, and it's working. Doc Rivers, someone asked me on the radio, and these radio hits are so hard because one, I'm not even calling out any producers. I know your job is hard, but like sometimes they're like, hey, can you come on in 20 minutes? And it's like, well, no. And that stresses me out when I have to say no. But two, you never really know what you're going to talk about. So they'll ask these questions. And one of my questions was, this was before Game 5, is Joe Mazzulla being thoroughly outcoached in this series? And I was like, well, fuck. Like That's not something I'd really given a ton of thought to. And I was like, well, maybe. It's like, is this the analysis that you come for? Is I'm just stuttering on there? Like, I don't fucking know. But like, he probably has. When you look at Doc Rivers, is the Daniel House pushing that button, giving B-ball Paul, like some of the B-ball Paul minutes have just been an actual shot of adrenaline.
Yep.
Who got in foul trouble? Was it PJ Tucker early on in Game 5?
Harris.
I don't remember who got in foul trouble, but you throw in DeAnthony Melton and the way that they've used him defensively through this series, I think that he's done a good job of that. I think this is more of a Sixers success story, in part though, because it's exposed a lot of just, I don't even know if it's flaws, but question marks about the Celtics, where I don't know if it's simply just a matter of play more aggressive against the Joel Embiid pick and roll, hit more shots. Because I do think, to get like big picture, and they might win this series, it's just like, is there something weird now going on with the, like, how do we view this center rotation moving forward? Where it's just Al Horford's getting older. Robert Williams III, I don't know if he's still injured or if this is just a bad matchup for him, but that's going to have to be something they reflect on over the offseason, or if not leading into Game 6.
Yeah, I really thought that the Celtics would be able to at least, have a little success playing Williams and Horford together and just having Williams guard PJ Tucker. That has not happened. So as I was trying to imagine myself in your shoes, getting asked that question about Mazzulla getting out coached, and I think what I would have said is the Nets kind of showed you with way worse personnel, like how you could do a decent job of making sure Embiid didn't get loose, which is you just double him relentlessly all the time and make the other Sixers, try to score. And the Nets lost that series for several reasons, but it wasn't necessarily because they had a bad defensive plan. Now, like, I'm not saying the Celtics, the obvious answer was, let's just do what the Nets did. Let's double all the time, because the Celtics just don't play that way. And it's, if you imagine the counterfactual of Boston coming up with this totally new defensive scheme where they double all the time and they trap and stuff, which they never do, and then they lose the series, then it's like, what is Joe Mazzulla doing? But at least like the Nets showed you a way to try to handle Embiid. And, maybe that would have just meant Harden had more than 2 40-plus point games. But I think there was something to take away from that first round series that the Celtics have not really gone to very much. It may be a little late in the game to try that. I think more than likely Boston is just going to, rely on making more shots and kind of sticking to the plan. But if, they're out of time now because you can't lose again. So maybe it's a halftime adjustment. It's hard to say. What have you thought of, you mentioned Tatum. So like every year we do this thing where, is Tatum finally, at that tier 1 level of just like, if you have him, he can be the best player on a title team, because he shot 30.6% from 3, 45.5% overall. He's averaging like 26, 11, and 5, has had really good stretches. Do you feel like Tatum has had a good series, like a decent series, an encouraging series, a discouraging series? Like what? Because he's one of the most confounding, really good players in the league, because we're just never quite sure if he's all the way at the level we think he can get to, and we just kind of keep waiting. What has this series, if anything, kind of made you think or reevaluate about Tatum?
I don't think it's made me reevaluate Tatum at all. Is that a fair thing to say? It's just, if you have problems with the way that he settles or carries himself on offense sometimes, I don't think that's necessarily changed. But you've also seen, I think, at least in denser pockets, that this is someone who can be ultra aggressive if he doesn't have the jumper falling or the 3-pointer falling, where maybe you couldn't say that in years past. I think the bigger, and I don't know if it's an indictment, but doesn't speak to this team's structure, is that you're still not going to, I think in this series, he's tied for the lead in assists per game with Marcus Smart, but both of them are averaging, they have 3 different guys averaging 4 or more. Like, you don't have that. Marcus Smart is the best passer on your team. And that's maybe fine if Jason Tatum, as he reached like the levels of like Kevin Durant or Kawhi Leonard as a passer, I think he's probably closer to there than not. But like, I think really the main issue might be sometimes it's too easy for him to fade away because he's not the one that you're primarily going to use as the table setter. And I don't know if that's an indictment of his game or the roster structure. Does he need to be the one that's going to demand to operate on the ball more and run those set? Like, and then it seems like there are other players on the team where Jaylen Brown will feel like he gets frustrated, like all of a sudden deviating from the game plan. He's hoisting up a contested jumper, or he has one of those nights where he just goes like 3 of 8 from the foul line. I think he was in game 5, which is not it's atypical, but it's not completely unusual for him.
Yeah, he's got that in him every once in a while.
I think if anything, this series has reinforced the the weird variability of the Celtics, where you look at their talent 1 through 7, let's say, and you're kind of left thinking, well, why the fuck are they trying to play Peyton Pritchard right now? Like Joe Mazzulla was clearly searching, and it's just to be in that situation when you have those top 7 guys it's weird.
Yeah, right. It's just,
my camera's shaking because I'm so like
it's hard to put a finger on it. That's why I was asking about Tatum. Is it's kind of like in a series that's gone away, you know, that's getting away from you. If you're the Celtics, it's kind of like, well, maybe our best player just didn't play well enough. And I guess like 30% from 3 is not great if you're very much a make or miss team. But I don't come away from this thinking ill of Tatum either. Like, I think he's been good enough, and I think Brown mostly has been good enough too. I guess I'm just surprised that, I don't know. I just felt like the Sixers had, you know, there were more holes to poke in the Sixers coming in. And I felt like, you know, Embiid's injury was going to be a big issue. And I guess maybe it's really just like, I didn't think Harden had even, you know, 1 game in him, like the 2 that he's played so far. So I guess maybe that's where it comes down to. I don't know. It's been amazing to see Harden have these games.
So Rome 8180, whose podcast I was on this past week, the Devil's Den podcast, I think it is. I don't want to get that wrong. I apologize. Said this in our Discords. I'm going to read it. Like he said it while we were recording. I've always thought coaching mattered a lot. I know Dan feels the opposite, but the fact that the Sixers have just been able to run the same Harden and Embiid pick and roll over and over shows the lack of adjustments. I also do think over history, you see coaches take over a team and that team take a massive leap with the same personnel. The Warriors would be an example. Well, clearly Mazzulla didn't hurt the Celtics during the regular season. He seems to be in over his head here. The playoffs probably maximize the importance of a coach since constant on-the-fly adjustments are required. And I read this by saying, 1, it's totally fair to think that way. And 2 is the person, the figure, the stakeholder in this series that you're most disappointed or most responsible for where the Celtics are. Is it Joe Mazzulla then? Because we just said, we're not going to ascribe the lion's share of the blame to Jason Tatum. It's as a team. I want to make that. You said, like you pointed out at the top of this, they missed a lot of shots that they normally make. Some of them super high quality. But if you had to just point, is it, okay, well, Al Horford's looked really weird or bad on offense at points. But then I feel like for me, it might just be more the defensive principles that the Celtics are espousing here, or their refusal to, or stubbornness to deviate from them or change them. And that I think would fall on Mazzulla. I might be all over. You talk me that it's RW3's fault for not being more eminently playable.
No, I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. I would say that like the Harden and Embiid pick and roll is one of the hardest actions to defend in the league, like full stop. That's just
right up there with Devin Booker existing. Yeah,
right up there with Devin Booker being alive and shooting basketballs. Yeah, I know. It is fair to say that, and I just praised Darvin Ham for making a key adjustment that short circuited something that the Warriors probably thought like, we got it now, like this is going to work. We got them. And then, no, you don't in the second half, like at in-game adjustment, that's a real thing. I think, you know, Eric Spoelstra is going to have several hagiographies written about him after this postseason too. And you just sort of can't praise those guys without, I guess, you know, doing the opposite for the coaches that don't seem to be making the adjustments. By the way, with a roster in Boston that like, you could do a lot of different stuff with that personnel. You got a lot of good like backcourt defenders. You have switchable forwards. You got Williams.
You could roll out Grant Williams plus Caucasians like they did at the end of.
Sure. Why not? Get creative. I wouldn't go with that strategy, by the way.
No, I would not. That was just they cut into the lead when they came in.
Sixers wouldn't see it coming. They wouldn't expect it. That's not on the whiteboard that's not in the locker room.
The all transparent lineup.
Yeah. Fair point by Rome. I can't get too critical of that one.
Of the teams that are, well, actually we need to get to the next series. I'll do that to wrap up. Do you want to move on to Nuggets Warriors? Wow.
Yes, I do. I do. I would love to move on to Nuggets Warriors in a week or so.
Do you want to move on to Nuggets Suns?
Yeah.
I have so many just
Oh,
thoughts
good.
and feels
Because
about
I have
it.
a very basic question for you. Is this series as simple as Devin Booker has to be superhuman? Otherwise, the Nuggets are just too good. That feels like my takeaway so far.
Yes,
Yeah.
because
Okay. Good pod.
you know what the other issue is too, is they need both Devin Booker and Kevin Durant to be superhuman, and like Kevin Durant's only been Kevin Durant in like 2 of these 5 games, maybe 3 of these 5. He
He did not look good
we
early
were
in the
both
game last
about to say the
night.
same
He
thing.
did not look right.
No, to start, he looked awful, and then he had that stretch where it's like, all right, he's fine. And then it was afterwards, it was, oh no, this was not him. Is he tired? He's been playing a crap ton of minutes, but Devin Booker has a rough game relatively, and I think this game, more so than the first 2 games, reinforced why the Denver Nuggets should just be title favorites and probably should have been entering the playoffs. I even said that I understand why people would want to default to the Bucks in general. Like at points, no, it should have been the Nuggets. Their starting lineup has won this series by 40 points.
Mm-hmm.
So if they lose, and like even when you have, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that starting lineup was awesome all year. Like that's just more than any other team. You get back to what you're saying, but more than any other team, have sort of given us what we expected. Minus like they don't have any defensive problems. Like I expected defensive problems, but otherwise, like all the guys you needed to play well have played well. Generally speaking, Jokic is an unsolvable problem. Like it's just like the Nuggets have performed up to expectations the most consistently of any playoff team so far. I think is that you know what I mean? Does that seem fair to say?
Yeah, and look, they pull the thread where it's, hey, Bruce Brown in for KCP. That lineup is a plus 18 in the minutes they played this series. Now, it comes with the caveat of Phoenix just does not have a real supporting cast right now. And let me continue to focus on the Nuggets though.
Yeah.
The Nikola Jokic, all-time great, just breaking the brain. And when he looked he didn't start game 5 good. I'm with you. I trip up over like these game numbers. But like he kind of sensed as it went on, especially when Jamal Murray felt like he was actively detrimental offensively for much of the first half. Like he kind of sensed, he just knows how to read the game of, well, what do I need to do? Where it's like, if I need to be ultra aggressive as a scorer, it doesn't matter if I'm missing all these tip bunnies at the rim. Like, and then he's just going to go and he's going to drop a trillion points, knock down jumpers, hit these shots off the dribble. He's just an incredible basketball player. What I think he has impressed me. He is by far the least shocking thing insofar as you should even be shocked about what the Nuggets have done. And I think probably the biggest surprise to me has been Michael Porter Jr.'s defense.
Right.
He had a really good offensive game in game 5, but you look at what he did defensively, and I tweeted this out. I think that was probably the most complete defensive performance of his career. Playoffs, regular season, whatever. You had rebounding, giving contests with length. His length bothered Devin Booker a little bit. He was matched up against Kevin Durant a little bit without getting absolutely roasted. He was really contesting passes. He came in for a steal, I think, on an entry pass to DeAndre Ayton. Yeah, it was a gamble. It was a smart gamble. And he wasn't everywhere. He was just reliable. And that's what you need when you're going to look at some of the defensive coverages, where if you're going to bring Nikola Jokic up really high, you need guys behind him who are reliable. He's been that guy for most of this series. And that changes the entire calculus of what the Nuggets can be if he is this player. Because yes, I saw someone, I wish I could remember who it was in the tweet, but I laughed hysterically at it, where it's like Michael Porter Jr. is basically the living embodiment of what you become when your dad owns a Mercedes dealership. And there's some truth to that on offense, but like he's gotten a little bit better at finding his own stuff on offense. He's also missed some really high quality looks in this series. Yeah. But if he's going to be like impactful consistently on defense, I'm not talking about a net positive. I'm not even saying a net even, which he's been probably both in this series, just not this demonstrative negative, someone you can rely on. That like we have to, it's not just, yes, the Nuggets could win the title this season. We need to start talking about like who's going to dethrone them next season. That changes everything about Denver. I think watching them, and there are people who are more educated in this than I would be, I thought they did a good job of varying up their defensive coverages. I like that they put more Aaron Gordon on Devin Booker. We saw more of. I think that makes life more difficult on Devin Booker. We saw in game 4, there was weird, specifically maybe towards the latter half of the game, where there was a lot of helping off of KD onto Devin Booker, or maybe vice versa.
Wild. And the Suns, by the way, there's a lot of like reels out there of Durant being very open and not getting the basketball. So some of that's on Phoenix, but continue.
And I don't know if like, do you need to stack the floor with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker on the same side more to put the Nuggets in that predicament? But again, I want to have all this happening, and then Goat Boy in the chat saying, also, Jamal Murray's underperforming. He could easily get 10 plus more points than Yoke. If he wakes up, the league is in trouble. I think they might have found something where it's let's set more high ball screens for him. We saw that in the second half against Phoenix. This is unique because of Phoenix's personnel, but the Nuggets to be here, even against a Suns team that's shallow, missing CP3, despite Jamal Murray, aside from he had the electric game 1 and really just hasn't been like that since. That's huge for them. And Bruce Brown, my God, I tweeted this as well. I want to live entirely in the moment, but I can't help but worry about him pricing himself out of Denver.
He's priced himself out of Denver.
Yeah,
because Denver has non-bird rights on him. And I think the most they can offer him is like $7.7 million starting salary. Like that ain't it. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's where they're at. That's not going to cut it.
I'm wondering if it changes because of the scale, the taxpayers mid-level, but if it's not, they can offer him the taxpayers mid-level then, which will be more than that 7.7 million, I think.
Yeah.
But like, that's their max number. Is the taxpayer mid-level or 120% of his current salary. The rim pressure he provides, he's been very sturdy defensively at points. I think KCP, look, Devin Booker has kind of roasted him, but like KCP gives you someone who's just at least semi-competent on the idea of KCP on Devin Booker.
I want KCP on every playoff roster I ever have. Like he's kind of like the modern Danny Green a little bit, where like he's just going to make 40 some odd % of his threes. He's going to defend capably. He can, he's not just a 3-point shooter. He can cut to the bat. Like KCP is like, outside of like stars, is just put him on if he's a starter for you, you are not precluded from winning a title. Like he can absolutely, I mean, he's done it. So it's not like that's a great revelation, but like he's super underrated because he just doesn't take anything off the table and keeps showing up now lately in this portion of his career on really, really good teams with title aspirations. Anyway,
if he continues to be this valuable, the Nuggets maybe, just maybe, might trade him for a ball dominant point guard who doesn't match well with their best player.
Yeah, only if you also trade Kyle Kuzma with him. That's how you have to do it.
Everyone was wrong about the Denver Nuggets. Even this podcast that was high on them, I picked them to win the title, and even I was wrong about the Denver Nuggets because I thought there were more defensive questions because of how they closed the regular season specifically. It turns out maybe they really were. Wait, Stephen in the chat, Walmart Danny Green for is he Walmart? I don't know. I mean, Danny Green might be like the best transition guard defender of all time. So
right, Danny Green is the ideal that you aspire to. To be called any version of Danny Green is a high compliment for a role-playing guard. Let's call it that.
So yeah, everyone was wrong about the Denver Nuggets. I think they are probably the odds-on title favorites, but they should have been ever since after it was clear during the regular season. It was like they should have been the title favorites to me, and maybe the Lakers or Warriors would bring them back down to earth in the next round, or whoever they face in the finals. I had this team winning in 6. I don't know how great I feel about that. Role players tend to shoot better at home, and I definitely want to get into the Suns a little bit. But I'm infinitely impressed with the Nuggets. Everyone was wrong. It's not just that they're title favorites now. They should have been the long-standing title favorites.
You know what's reassuring to me is that
Christian Brown is going to be really good if he ever figures that out on offense.
That he's a great defender that you can put on Kevin Durant sometimes. That's very reassuring. All we do is talk about how the playoffs are different. The playoffs are different, at least in this one regard, where the Nuggets look so good after being the top seed in the West. It's like, okay, good. Now we can actually start looking at the regular season as somewhat predictive. This is an outlier, I think, but it's like, it's nice. And we'll have to talk about this later because there are so many like uncertainties surrounding it, but wouldn't it be awesome if we got Jokic and Embiid in the finals and then we could say like, well, because whether it's Giannis or Steph or Kawhi or Durant, you say like, yeah, those two guys have the best seasons, but they're not the best players because in the playoffs, it's different. If you got Jokic and Embiid in the finals, you're going to have somebody with a very recent MVP that you could also then say, oh, he's also the best player. It's not just that he had the most valuable season. I'm really looking forward to that possibility because the way it would simplify a lot of the debates we have to have, Because if you win a title and you're MVP, like no notes, there's nothing else to argue about with that. And that rarely happens, but I'm looking forward to that hypothetical.
The discourse of that series will be terrible. And I'm going to tell you right
I
now, I don't
want
think
it.
it would land in favor of Embiid. I think
No,
that would be a series that kind of exposes not how wrong the voters were about Embiid, but how wrong people were about Jokic.
Yeah.
And some people, you can kind of tell, and this isn't an insult. I think there are casual basketball fans who are super important. I hope a lot of them listen to this podcast when they care about the NBA during the 3 months of the year that its postseason's active. You can kind of tell, like, when people are just sort of seeing Nikola Jokic,
yes,
like for the first time on a regular basis, and it could be like radio hosts and podcasters. There's like, look at what he's doing. Everybody's like, he can shoot like this and finish like this.
Yeah.
He's like, he always looks discombobulated when he's going up for those shots on the run. They just always go in.
I don't know if we had this conversation or where we landed on it, but it's been out there of like, who's under the most pressure in the playoffs, or what are the stakes for certain guys. And like Jokic came up, I think, but like in a positive way. Now, if the Nuggets, close this out, make the finals after, whoever they see in the conference finals, probably the Lakers. And in that case, Jokic just has to go through Anthony Davis, which would be, add to the legend. Like, we're going to look at this, half decade or so run of his with, 2 MVPs, maybe should have had a third, very debatable, and then wins a title. And it's like, Jokic was the best player in the league, like all along. And we just now, like, we have to acknowledge that for a massive chunk of, NBA history, that dude was the best there was. Like that's on the table right now.
I try not to have rooting interest outside of the woebegone Knicks, but there's a part of me that really wants the Nuggets to win the title so I can just have the most insufferable victory lap possible. Anyone who listens to this podcast should be rooting against.
I want that for you too, because you were on it. You had the Nuggets, and I like the idea of Jokic being regarded as like just undisputed. This is the best player, because I think it would be a good thing if a guy who just like makes does the right thing offensively all the time in like the pass, shoot, dribble decision tree, like plays kind of perfect offensive basketball and is creative and doesn't do it with like jumping out of the gym or running past guys. I'm excited for a world where we have like Jokic emulators, where it's like everybody wanted to shoot 35 footers because of Steph. And now we might just have like everybody trying to make really sweet pocket passes and shooting off the wrong foot. Like I'm here for the next, for the generation of kids that try to play like Jokic. That sounds very exciting.
And I hope they all have the same body types.
Yeah, he's really a trailblazer. Anyone can play basketball. Look at this guy.
Do we want to move on to the Suns here? And we actually have a good comment, which I think is a leaping off point, and I'll hijack this part of the conversation too. But Stefan says, I think Suns need to spam more pick and roll. Now, here's Devin Booker is spectacular, and I have some uncomfortable questions that we're going to need to ask for other people who are not Devin Booker. They're uncomfortable probably for us, but they could spam more pick and roll. I think we're kind of seeing the limitations on a Suns team that doesn't have CP3. And everyone talked a lot about, or the idea of CP3, everyone talked a lot about how much faster they're playing. And they are playing faster. And this is just like, through the first 2 games, their average offensive possession time was 15.1 seconds. Now it's down to 13.8. They're scoring 1.19 points per offensive possession while their offense is faster compared to 1.16. It's not this huge difference. And so anyone who thought they were better off without CP3 when seeing how fucking shallow they are was out of their mind. But I think we've also, at least through the first 2 games, I think we saw more of the impact on how much pick and roll can you actually run without CP3 there. Devin Booker he's the second best passer on the team, and he's a fantastic passer. I don't know if you can spam pick and rolls, especially when the Nuggets aren't going to play drop as readily against him like they would CP3. And that's why I think you need CP3. And then we also saw the impact, as I stammered through before and didn't finish that thought, on DeAndre Ayton through not so much game 5, but like games 3 and 4, where we saw his minutes were down too. I think at least one of those he was in foul trouble, if I'm mistaken. Like, he's not getting as many shots. Like, that's kind of when you don't have CP3 running those actions. CP3 is important to this team. So whether he plays in game 6, whether he starts, if he does, is he coming off the bench? And the fact that the Nuggets are going to inherently drop against him because they're going to be okay with his mid-range jumpers, that's an element of your offense you need, in large part, not just because Kevin Durant's been all over the place. Your bench is talk about all over the place. Landry Shamet comes up huge in game 4. Game 5, Josh Okogie's so bad that Landry Shamet is starting in the third quarter. I thought he did a better job than people credit. I thought the Nuggets just made better offensive adjustments where if you're going to set higher on-ball screens, those are a lot harder for Landry Shamet to navigate than if he's trying to defend Jamal Murray away from the ball or just straight up. But like, you can't count. You're trying to, do we need to play more Terrence Ross? Do we need to play more TJ Warren? I think the one of the adjustments the Suns can make is I think Torrey Craig needs to actually play. And he tweeted out something cryptic, I think, after getting basically another DMP outside of garbage time. I just don't know if they have the firepower, or depth beyond. And you could say we over romanticize depth in the playoffs when you're so reliant on these two guys need to be superhuman every single night, every single possession for 40 plus minutes a game. Your margin for error does not exist. And right. I think that's just what this series boils down to for the Suns so far. And look, let's not forget when CP3 got injured, I'm not saying this entire series would be different. Phoenix was up 8 in game 2 at the time. The tenor of the series could look completely different if he never gets injured. Injuries are part of it, especially when it comes to CP3. The Nuggets might have come back anyway. They've been great. But they're a team where they haven't even lost yet. They're headed home, and they have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And Devin Booker's been the single most valuable player in these playoffs, I think, just because of what he's brought defensively, maybe not so much in game 5. Like, I'm already thinking about their offseason because I feel like they desperately need to flesh out at this point, let's just be real. They need to flesh out the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th spots on this because it's what are you like? CP3 has that partial guarantee and it's basically half his salary. Yeah, I've long thought, no, you're going to keep it. But now I'm like, is there just a world where they waive him, stretch it, have that $5 million in the books for 3 years, and then try to give themselves flexibility on the trade market? But hey, that rests on DeAndre Ayton having actual trade value.
Right.
And does he?
Let's tie that together. So one of the most, I think on our part, certainly my part, overlooked or sort of, I don't know, misjudged angles of this postseason was Phoenix's lack of depth. Because I've just kind of viewed it as they have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. Like, I don't really care that's enough. Any theory of the Suns making a conference finals or finals was based on you can't do anything with those two guys. They could, have some traffic cones out there. Those two guys are just going to be too hard to guard. That was wrong. So the CP3 injury, I think it's not just about him specifically. It's about you just took a guy that you really could play out of the picture, and that exacerbates the lack of depth everywhere else. To get to the pick and roll spamming, I think that in a way is going to play into Denver's hands because I think they should be more than happy to just have Jokic and whoever is guarding Booker just double him, and somebody stay hugged up on Durant wherever he is. And then you say, DeAndre Ayton, you need to beat us in space. And maybe he'll hit like 1,000,000 9-foot push shots, right? But he shot 5 free throws.
Don't forget the fading hooks.
5 free throws in 148 minutes. 2 for 5 from the foul line for Ayton. He's averaging 10 points a game. Like, if DeAndre Ayton beats you, like that's a shake his hand type of thing. Like, that's just, that plays the Nuggets could not be happier, because then you don't have to drop, you don't have to do anything. You just get the ball out of Booker's hands, don't let Durant touch it, and let Ayton be the decision maker or scorer. Like, the Suns cannot survive that way. There's no chance, especially with some of the poor shooting they've gotten from the other guys they've tried to throw out there on the wings. So that's a depth issue too. I just think, like, as far as the offseason goes, you got to try to trade Ayton. And the CP3 decision really is a decision, because you have to turn certainly Ayton's money into 2 guys. You just need that to be 2 guys. You can go find a center that's going to average 10 and 8 in a playoff series, which is what Ayton is giving them. I know, like, points and rebounds per game, or, we try to do better than that in our analysis, but, like, in terms of his actual role and impact, you can go find someone. You can go Kevon Looney, like, just throw him out there. Like, he's not making a fraction. He's making a fraction of what Ayton's going to make next year. And you can just plug and play someone like that, get a wing. So again, I don't know what his value is, but the depth issue affects now. it affects the balance of the series for however much longer it lasts, and it affects the offseason. Like getting more playable guys around Booker and Durant is just priority one. And to do that, it might mean no more Chris Paul and no more DeAndre Ayton, because you just need the flexibility, the money, the trade capital to flesh out this roster. Because like if you look down the rest of it beyond Booker, Durant, like who do you want back? Like, do you, I guess, campaign as a backup? Like maybe Jock Landale as a backup? Like how much worse are they with Jock Landale in there versus Ayton, especially like dollar for dollar? So yeah, it's all connected. The depth, the pick and roll stuff, and the offseason. It's just the issue that we didn't pay enough attention to was depth. That's just it. And usually that's the wrong approach for a playoff series, but it's so profound for Phoenix that it just has become the defining feature of the series, in addition to Jokic just being God. Like that's the other one.
I have 2 follow-ups that should be mostly quick. Does Indiana this summer, after the full year has passed, and they can do it, Miles Turner for DeAndre Ayton straight up?
I don't think I would do that if I were the Pacers. I think Miles Turner might just be better. Like, or at least, the theory of him makes more sense than Ayton, I think. I wouldn't do that if I'm Indy.
Who has more trade value, DeAndre Ayton at 3 years and $102 million guaranteed, or Jordan Poole at 4 years and $123 million guaranteed?
That's a good one. I'm going to say, you have to say Ayton. As much as I just dumped on him, like, don't you have to say Ayton? Because like, I think Poole, if you go get Jordan Poole, you're kind of saying he's going to run our offense for a significant portion of the minutes we play. And that's a terrifying thought based on how he played this whole season, because he can't be a role guy. Clearly, he's not interested in being a role player. If you were interested in that, he'd be playing a lot differently right now.
I think that I would probably lean Ayton as well, but it's just he plays a position that has less scarcity. And when you're at that number, right, I think there's a team that might be more willing to bet on Jordan Poole as just the idea of a shot creator.
They're both bad.
It's just like, are they even? You could, if you're going to waive CP3, you could try and do the DeAndre Ayton for Kyrie Irving stuff with Dallas. What team wants DeAndre Ayton? What team is going to be chomping at the bit for DeAndre Ayton? A lot of people like to name Toronto. I don't love that with Siakam. And they now have Jakob Poeltl. Yeah. You also don't have anything to add to an Ayton trade anymore. You have swaps, like a couple swaps if you really want.
No, it's tough. I mean, it's funny. Like it seemed like the right decision for Phoenix. We're getting way too into transactional stuff for a Suns team that's actually still alive. But like, it seemed like the right decision to match just to preserve the asset, except like it's not an asset anymore. he's someone that you might like. I don't know. We should really spend some time trying to figure out what Ayton's trade value is if and when the Suns are eliminated. Cause that's like, I don't know what I would peg it at right now.
This is still skewing transactional, but in Discord, Real Syrup 2219 posed an interesting question. Not that I didn't respect him before this series, but it makes me respect Devin Booker so much more. He's been amazing. I can't even decide on a single superlative. And one of the superlatives was Booker's been so good. It makes you think the Suns would have been better off keeping their picks and defensive pieces instead of trading everything for Kevin Durant.
This is like my Donovan Mitchell, Lauri Markkanen thing, except way better, right? Like,
right.
I mean, well, would Bridges have ever gotten to be this version of Bridges in Phoenix? That's an indictment of Phoenix, but I don't know. Also, wait, hold on. I just had a better thought. The Suns made the finals and then they won 64 games. And then Chris Paul probably got COVID and that's why they got smoked at last season's playoffs. Like the Suns were awesome. They were really good. And they had all these assets too that they don't have anymore. So maybe that's like the correct take. Is that the correct take? Have we flipped all the way already on the Durant trade was bad?
I will say I very clearly thought the Suns, as constructed before, didn't have it. And this rests on two things would have needed to happen. If you still... And I guess it wouldn't have been an issue because CP3 got injured. But like you're always, when you have CP3, you're going to gravitate more towards CP3 and Devin Booker to where even when they expanded Mikal Bridges' role, it was never anywhere near what it was now in Brooklyn. So I would be super interested to see what does Bridges look like in this series if it had played out the same way and CP3 gets injured, because you have no choice, I would think, other than kind of to go and come close to exploring what he's done in Brooklyn. So it's Kevin Durant.
Right.
And I think I've been banging the drum of when you make these trades, even if you make them in the offseason when they tend to happen, you kind of need, if it's happening after free agency and the draft and whatever, you need some time to reboot like the consolidation of it all, whereas you need time to flesh out that supporting cast. That's going to be their job for the offseason. But given how well Bridges played in Brooklyn and how well Devin Booker is playing now, to the point where Kevin Durant he's been putting up, even by, doesn't really ring the bell in game 5, but like he's been putting up mind-melting numbers, and he's just like been the Suns' second best player by a cosmically distant margin.
I don't know, man. They'd have Cam Johnson too, and all those picks.
And they'd be able to, look, it's a fair discussion to have, because you're out of like big chips to play. It's you have to, like, if you think DeAndre Ayton's this massive trade chip, you have to assume that he has a lot of value to a team. And look, I feel like we're veering too far into postmortem, but this is all stuff, whether the Suns win this series or not, there are just going to be huge questions about how they figure out the rest of this roster inside the limitations that they're operating in.
Yeah. Oh, I can't believe we're already there talking about that.
Well, we can talk about, I told you I was going to have an uncomfortable exercise for us.
Let's do an uncomfortable exercise, and then I'll take us out.
Is Devin Booker, over the course of a full season, regular season and playoffs, one of the 5 best players in the NBA now?
Well, let's figure it out.
Well, I'm not to interrupt again. I'm going to throw NBA players who are, the Ringer does this thing where they rank players throughout the course of the year. And I'm just going to throw some names out here. They're not all in front of Devin Booker, but are these, let's frame it this way. Are these players, or would you rather have these players? Which of these players would you rather have over the course of an entire season, regular season and playoffs, than Devin Booker? LeBron James?
No, I'd rather have Booker.
I'm with you. Ja Morant?
Oh, Booker.
Anthony Davis?
That's the closest one so far, but I guess Booker, just because Davis is going to miss time.
It's Booker. Damian Lillard?
Booker.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander?
I mean Booker, because we haven't seen it yet in the playoffs from SGA. We're watching it with Booker.
Yeah, I think the threat of his pull-up jumper at this point and he's played better even. Jimmy Butler?
Well, Butler is probably no worse than 3rd in postseason MVP right now, right? I would say, I might go Butler, because I think he's doing all this. Yeah, I don't know. But plus, Butler's sprained his ankle, so I don't know how we evaluate this last series. Just for purposes of the exercise, so we don't keep saying Booker, I'm going to say Butler by a nose, but like, the age thing is a huge factor. So if we're starting next season, like that might be Booker.
I don't mean to simplify this. I'm taking Devin Booker pretty comfortably here.
Can we say who you're not going to take Devin Booker over?
We're getting there.
Okay.
Kawhi Leonard.
I'd take Booker. Kawhi may never play basketball again. I don't know.
That was mean, but I'm with you. Starting at interesting. Jason Tatum.
I'm hesitating because they're like very. I think Booker, because he has shown us a capacity to just get more shots than Tatum can get, and I think that matters in the playoffs.
Luka Doncic.
Oh, I'm going to take Luka. Sorry.
This might be my spiciest take. I'm taking Devin Booker.
Okay.
Kevin Durant.
Booker. He's outplaying him right now.
I'm with Booker. Last few names. Joel Embiid.
I'm going to take Embiid.
I'm going to take Booker. He's easier just to build a team around, I think. Steph Curry.
I'm going to take Curry. You knew that was coming.
I'll take Steph. Giannis.
Ooh, I'm going to take Giannis.
I'm going to take Giannis too. Jokic. So Steph, Jokic, Giannis were basically the only consensus players that we were willing to take over Devin Booker.
Yep. That's wild. That's wild. So he's a top 5, basically.
He's inside the top 10. It's pretty definitive to me at this point. I mean, you took AD, you took Butler. The 7 territory, it sounded like an outrageous question, but I did the exercise in my head, and it's an uncomfortable discussion, I think, for some of us, but like it's an actual discussion.
I think there is some element of recency bias at work here, because regular season wise, like he might have made an all NBA team. Like he was in the mix. I think if he'd played more games, it would have been harder, but the playoff run, like you can't say a single bad thing about it. He's been the best player in the playoffs. And that's with Jokic probably is going to have something to say about it by the end of this series, but Butler's been awesome. There's been no shortage of incredible performances. Like Steph has been really good by and large, but Booker has just been, if the playoffs matter the most and Booker's been the best in the playoffs, like it kind of makes it pretty simple in some ways. Yeah.
Are you ready to take us out on that? I'm sure you're a little bit rattled.
I am very rattled by what we just decided Devin Booker, where he belongs in the NBA hierarchy. Everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks for your comments. What's up, Brent? We didn't say hi. He's been commenting. Please, as Dan mentioned at the top, remember to rate, review, subscribe, follow us on our socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. If you are watching us on YouTube and you want to be involved in the live streams, subscribe there. And let's see. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. We always forget to do that. I will take us out with a shout out to Frank Ntilikina, but as you mentioned, I don't know who else to apologize to, because Mitchell Robinson has not been as great. So I'm going to go back, at least for today, to issuing an apology to Jared Allen.
As I'm just going to stall here as we try to get out, because I can't find the screen that I need to put up. So goodbye, everyone. No apologies to Jared Allen here.